Hey guys, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I'm your host, Lynn Sarah Georges, and here we talk about all things life and all things Christ.
I'm looking for somebody I can call. Looking for the only one I can get my own. Tell me that it's true.
Okay, so today our topic is self-love. Unpopular opinion, self-love can be selfish. Now, before we get a little hot, let me cook. First, I want to establish that we live in a society and in a culture now where self-love is like emphasized and told to be prioritized. We're all told to love yourself and put yourself first and prioritize your own self-interest over all things at times. And so I want to talk about the dangers of when we do that too much. So by human nature, we automatically always consider ourselves first, right? For instance, when we're kids, your mom gives you a slice of pizza and tells you split it with your sibling. Once you cut that piece of pizza, if one side comes out bigger, you and I both know you're taking the bigger slice and you're handing your sibling the smaller slice because by nature, we consider ourselves first. We want to make sure we're good, right? Before we make sure somebody else is good. And that within itself is not necessarily the problem. The problem comes when we do it too much. When is putting ourselves first a problem, right? There are, in the Bible, in Matthew 22 to verse 37, Jesus basically, they ask him and they're like, which one of the commandments is the most important? And he obviously says that love your God with all your mind, with all your soul, everything, right? Love your God. And then they said, what's the second most important one? And he says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. I find that to be so interesting and revealing for us because in that text itself, we're told to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. It's already assumed that we love ourselves. So he's not instructing us to do that because it's assumed that we put ourselves first. It's assumed that we're taking care of ourselves and that we're in a position to love a neighbor, right? So we're instructed to emphasize loving our neighbor first. So in my mind, based on his answer, it goes like this: love God first, love yourself, and then love your neighbor. It feels as though the way we're going about it sometimes is loving ourselves first, and then depending on the person, neighbor and God fall anywhere or not even on that hierarchy, right? The problem with that is we tend to be too focused on ourselves, and I genuinely think that sometimes that does lead to like negative thoughts because we're so hyper focused on how do I look, what am I doing, how am I coming off, my goals, my time, my schedule. Like it's me. Everywhere it's me, and you don't pour into other people. And to pour into ourselves is to pour into other people. And if we were meant to live alone and just prioritize ourselves, then we would have been made alone. Adam would have been made by himself in the garden and we wouldn't need companion. But God himself says in Genesis that it is not good to be alone. You can't expect to be next to somebody else, with somebody, working with people at work, at school, in your community, wherever you are, in a relationship, in a friendship, and then to put yourself first. I think it's 1 Corinthians 13:5 that says the definition of love throughout 1 Corinthians 13, but at one point in the 5th verse, it says, love is not self-seeking. I truly believe that based on how I understand the Bible and the story of man and the story of our relationship with God and the relationship between the Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, our purpose is to love. Our purpose is to love God, ourselves, and one another. But when we overemphasize the need to love ourselves, when we only prioritize ourselves, we then there's no space for anyone else. And we fall out of the true definition of love because love is not self-seeking. When loving properly, I pour into you, you pour into me. And both of our cups are filled. But if I'm constantly worrying about me, and if my cup is filled, then I'm not pouring into you. And that may be leading you to feel like you're missing something and you're not enough or you're not receiving. And then it doesn't generate love. So I say this to say, and when I make these videos and when I discover these things, it's more for myself. This was really a self-discovery of perhaps I don't feel fulfilled because I keep looking for what will fulfill me. Perhaps I'm feeling empty. I'm feeling like I can't find purpose. I'm feeling like I'm missing out on love and all of these things because I'm looking for me. I think the moment I take the microscope off of my life and I look in my community, in my neighborhood, in my life, at school, at work, who needs pouring into, then I may begin to receive what I'm putting out. You know what I mean? So self-love, self-care, self. How do we do that? There's this saying that goes, you can't love another until you love yourself. And I don't 100% agree with that. I think we can there are plenty of people out there who are just loving everyone and might need a little bit more self-love, right? But the thing about it is, if someone doesn't know how to love themselves, I think the best way to find out is how they love other people. Because sometimes we are us. I am me. And I may not know how to love me yet. I may not know what it means to love. I may not know what that looks like. But in the process of loving somebody else, I might discover how to love myself based on the treatment I give somebody else. If I wouldn't do it to my sister, if I wouldn't say it to my sister, if I wouldn't say it to a loved one, to a best friend, to a close friend, then I shouldn't be saying it to myself. I shouldn't be treating myself that way, right? And so even through loving others, there's something to be learned about how to love ourselves. But I think a lot of us spend a lot of time loving ourselves and prioritizing ourselves and putting ourselves first, and not enough time putting others first. Self-love itself is not bad. We are encouraged by the Bible and by Christ to love ourselves, to take care of ourselves. We see Christ pour into himself multiple times during his journey here on earth. He pulls away from the crowd. He goes to pray. He goes to connect with his Father to do what builds him up. The same way perhaps self-love might look like getting your nails done, getting your hair done, having a day to just relax, watching a show, watching a movie, hanging out and doing the things that pour back into you, your hobbies, etc. Right? That within itself is not the problem. We should be doing these things consistently to pour into ourselves, to love ourselves. We shouldn't hate ourselves. We are creations of God. We are children of God. And so we are called to see ourselves the way he sees us, as worthy of dying for, right? The problem is when self-love turns into self-worship, when it turns into you having to be, or me having to be, the main aspect of everything. It turns into a problem when self-love comes at the expense of loving others. If self-love is not helping you to love others and to love God, then it is not the proper way of self-love. Culture has a very interesting way of promoting self-worship. And that is not what we're called to do, because idolizing yourself is still idolizing. And so, once again, I encourage us to practice self-love, but to do it in the right way. And so to the younger me who wants to know more about love, who wants to know more about how to love others and how to love herself, loving yourself is not the same as worshiping yourself. It is not putting yourself first at the expense of others. It is pouring into yourself the way Christ does, in the correct way, so that way you can show up for people better, so that way God can move and use you better for the purpose that you were called for. Anyways, that's the video for today. It is an unpopular opinion and you may not agree with it, and that is okay. The comment section is open. I always say it is like a table. Bring what you have to the table. We can discuss it. We can open the floor. And if necessary, we can make another video talking about it and maybe inviting others, giving them the space to share their opinions, and diving more into this topic of self-love, because I do think we should be talking about that more. When does self-love become selfish? Anyways, thank you for tuning in. I was your host, Lynn Sarah Georges. See you in the next video. Bye.